up as an undocumented immigrant, fear has been a part of my daily life. When I immigrated to the United States from Mexico with my family as an infant, I couldn't fully understand the problem. I knew there was something wrong with our family situation in the United States. In California, extra police officers are often on duty during the holidays to deter from drunk driving. So on days like Christmas and New Year's, we were haunted by the fear of being stopped at a checkpoint. We never knew, would the car be seized? Would we get an unreasonable ticket? Or would our worst nightmare come true, a one-way ticket to immigration officials? I also grew ashamed of my immigration status and learned to keep it a secret. I would lie to my friends that I was half white and half Mexican to not raise questions about my background. As I grew older, I learned I needed a social security number in order to drive, work, and seek financial aid. In the face of these unjust challenges, my family pushed me to continue. My mother fervently believed in education as a way forward. She taught my siblings and me by her example. In America, my mother learned English, obtained a high school equivalency diploma, and eventually a nursing degree. Watching my mother solve chemistry problems into the night while taking care of my siblings and me taught me hard work and determination. I also worked hard in school and was accepted to the University of California, Berkeley. Once I started college, the challenges continued. I lived in terror that immigration would find me and my family. I worried that everything I had worked so hard towards would be taken away from me. The New England Journal of Medicine recently called this the violence of uncertainty. I also began having intense recurring nightmares, dogs with razor-sharp teeth chasing after me. In these dreams, I'm always running and running out of time. But the worst was yet to come. In the midst of my senior year of college, my mother began experiencing serious medical problems. A doctor in the emergency room told her she needed surgery. But without health insurance, the procedure would be impossible. She did not have health insurance, and every time she applied for it, she was denied. The clock was ticking for my mother, and she ran out of options. My mother made the hardest decision of her life. She was forced to leave her family behind and immigrated to Canada, where she would find health care, employment, and stop feeling constantly afraid. I'll never forget saying goodbye to my mother. After living in the United States for 22 years, her possessions were reduced to 2 suitcases. On the day she left, the San Francisco airport seemed like any other. Couples kissing goodbye, families traveling together, business people shuffling through the crowd. My family and I sat on a bench in silence. My mother held a one-way ticket in one hand. I squeezed her other hand, not knowing when I would see her again. Watching my mother make her way towards the plane that day was the hardest moment of my life. I could not believe that my hardworking mother, a nurse who passionately cared for others, day in and day out, was being denied basic health care. It made it impossible for her to live here. Thankfully, she got the care she needed in Canada. My mother's experiences made me realize that undocumented immigrants don't have access to one of the most basic human rights, the ability to live a healthy life. My anger inspired me to become an advocate for the undocumented and marginalized in our healthcare system. With renewed determination, I graduated from UC Berkeley in 2012 with majors in biology and sociology. While I had achieved this important milestone, the road to becoming a doctor and a policy advocate was not at all clear. When I asked pre-health advisors for guidance, they didn't know how to help me in this particular situation. The idea that an undocumented student had made it to medical school seemed impossible. It wasn't until I was accepted to the New American Scholars Program, where I was surrounded by a community of undocumented youth activists. they inspired me to believe that I could change my situation. With 2 peers in the program, I started the group Pre-Health Dreamers. Our mission is to help undocumented students pursue careers in health and science. We do this by providing access to accurate information about their educational rights, providing access to a supportive community of peers, and by engaging with school officials to create immigrant-friendly policies and healthcare programs. As Pre-Health Dreamers first started, we first needed to understand what the barriers were for an undocumented student to apply to a medical profession and where there were opportunities to advocate. For instance, we learned you didn't need a social security number to apply to medical school. Then we would visit these schools and educate them about what we had learned. Just as important was to provide a human story that would help school officials realize just how important it was to open their doors. We leaned heavily on our allies. We worked with colleagues to learn about immigration and employment law, education policy, lender regulations, state licensure requirements. For instance, the Association of American Medical Colleges was instrumental in collecting data on which schools would consider an undocumented applicant. We partnered with Senator Ricardo Lara in California to pass legislation that would allow eligible undocumented students to apply to a health professional license. Through these collaborations, we have helped open the door to hundreds of undocumented students across the nation who aspire to become healthcare providers. I also achieved a personal triumph in 2015 when I was accepted to the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai, and I became the first of 2 undocumented students to enroll at the school. While medical school has been challenging, as one would imagine, the toughest moments have been witnessing the disconnect between the ideal practice of medicine and the reality of that care for the poor and disenfranchised. On the transplant surgery service, I assisted in a procedure to remove a portion of a healthy liver from a young woman who volunteered to donate it to her sick father. I realized that I could never do the same for a loved one who is undocumented and uninsured. On the inpatient medicine service, I helped take care of a woman who had blood clots in her lungs. After our medical team stabilized her, we had planned to discharge her on blood thinner medication. We needed to make sure that our patient had a follow-up appointment with a physician because of the potential serious side effects of these drugs. Unfortunately, our patient did not have health insurance, and she was ineligible because of her immigration status. The physicians that I worked with did not know how to navigate the medical system for an undocumented patient, and that shocked me. After all, there are an estimated 11.3 million undocumented immigrants, and over half of whom lack health insurance. On behalf of this patient with blood clots, I took it upon myself to call community health clinics in the area. I asked if they took uninsured patients and what their fees were. I scheduled a follow-up appointment and made sure that our patient could afford the copay. I thought about my own experiences in the medical system and how that's what I would have wanted to be done for me. Like all vulnerable communities, undocumented immigrants need medical professionals on their side. Poor and uninsured patients are often funneled into a certain set of facilities, such as community health clinics, resident-run clinics, and other low-resource facilities that depend on the kindness and generosity of these institutions to provide them with care. In our training as American physicians, we have somehow come to accept the fact that the poor are less deserving of care than others. And when we attempt to make positive changes for these communities, we are up against large bureaucratic systems that seem difficult to navigate. I know this firsthand. At Pre-Health Dreamers, we were up against policies that seemed impossible to change, legal issues too large to tackle, and few who could help guide our advocacy efforts. Vulnerable communities should not be forced to go through these challenges. And like all vulnerable patients, medical professionals are needed on their side. I think about the moments when lawyers told me that I should leave this country because I would never amount to much as an undocumented child in the United States. I learned to keep my head low, not to ask for much, and to be grateful for the opportunities that I did have. But the undocumented community deserves more. We deserve the right to an education, the ability to serve our own communities, and the ability to seek medical care as anybody else would. Families should not be forced to choose between health care and their loved ones, as my mother once did. In the midst of my medical studies, I'm also pursuing a master's in public policy at Harvard University. To tell you the truth, I still live in daily fear that I may be deported before I graduate, that I won't be able to do a medical residency in the United States, or that my working options will be limited once I graduate. But I no longer feel helpless or ashamed. With the Pre-Health Dreamers community, I have been inspired to find my path and bring others along the journey. And when there is no path, we are creating one. But we cannot do this alone. If America believes that healthcare is or should be a human right, then this issue is a humanitarian crisis. And it will take having everyone on board in order to make sure that we do have this right in the US. As a future doctor and policy advocate, I will stand alongside those who also believe in healthcare and equality for the undocumented. Thank you.